Today's big idea. Nuclear weapons are back at the center of global strategy, only this time the risks are proliferating and the guardrails are eroding. The authors argue the United States is entering a world of rising nuclear peers, opportunistic spoilers, and anxious allies. And its current modernization plan, conceived in 2009, doesn't fully match the threat. Even if finished as planned, the arsenal would still be insufficient for the problems ahead. So, as always, a bit of a disclaimer. This podcast episode is a summary of the author's opinions, those authors being Vipin Narang and Pranay Vaddi. Sorry if I mispronounced them. And their article being How to Survive the New Nuclear Age in this past issue of Foreign Affairs, July and August 2025. With that being said, the core lesson is blunt. Nuclear affairs must again be central to the U.S. grand strategy. That means building more, different, and better capabilities, reaffirming extended deterrence so allies don't go nuclear, and pushing innovative arms control fit for a three-way competition. Mission defense alone, like a sweeping golden dome, is costly, slow, and brings risks on its own. So, first, China's surge changes the game. In just 5 years, China doubled its operational warheads to about 600, with projections of 1,000 in 2030 and 1,500 in 2035. Beyond numbers, Beijing is fielding hundreds of new ICBM silos, low-yield regional systems, hypersonics, an orbital delivery concept to evade defenses, and a sturdier sea-based deterrent, suggesting a shift away from a minimal, retaliation-only posture. For the U.S. to credibly limit damage, it must be able to account for each new silo. Secondly, Russia's coercion and collapsing guardrails. So Moscow has shredded arms control accords and issued explicit nuclear threats. In fall of 2022, U.S. intelligence officials judged the odds of a Russian nuclear use the highest since the Cuban Missile Crisis, a coin flip, as one aide put it. With the New START treaty due to expire in 2026, the authors warn of the first full-blown arms race in half a century, this time with both Russia and China expanding simultaneously. Third, collusion and spillovers widen the danger, so Iran and North Korea are already aiding Russian war effort. Beijing and Moscow have deepened strategic ties. For example, China supplied about 90% of Russia's imports of G7 high-priority controlled goods in 2023, and then Russia helps China with early warning tech. And then the nightmare is synchronized aggression. So, for example, a Taiwan crisis while Russia pressures Eastern Europe, splitting U.S. forces and potentially forcing impossible choices. Then there's anxious allies and the proliferation risk. So, for the first time in decades, U.S. allies are debating their own nuclear options. Letting that door open would damage the NPT, spur cascades, for example, South Korea to Japan, and create brittle small arsenals that invite instability. The remedy is political as much as technical. Make extended deterrence visibly credible. Then, the U.S. plan is late and too lean. The $1 trillion triad refresh replaces Minuteman III with Sentinel ICBMs, Ohio-class subs with Columbia-class, and adds the B-21 stealth bomber as a long-range nuclear cruise missile. F-35s now carry a B-61-12 in Europe, but the plan cut submarine launcher capacity by over 40%. For example, from a max of 336 Tridents on 14 Ohios to 192 on 12 Columbias, just as China builds hundreds of silos and Sentinel is now roughly 10 years behind schedule. The authors argue the United States may need to deploy additional warheads to handle two nuclear peers. And then finally, what to do, practical moves for it, right? So first, reaffirm extended deterrence in Europe and the Indo-Pacific to head off allied proliferation. Second, pursue flexible arms control, for example, a new START update with a higher warhead ceiling that maintains U.S.-Russia stability while freeing warheads to cover China's silos. Think Washington Naval Conference, with the logic being common limits, tailored to realities. And then third, integrate nuclear planning and top-level policy across Europe, the Indo-Pacific, and the Middle East, with Congress funding an accelerated overhaul. So in conclusion, Narang and Vaddi's bottom line: the United States can still keep the peace in this new nuclear age, but only if it treats nuclear strategy as a front-burner mission, updates its arsenal and posture for two-peer deterrence, shores up allied confidence, and gets serious about creative guardrails. The alternative is driving into a storm the world has never weathered. So if this resonated with you, I suggest you go read the article yourself. Again, it's in this past Foreign Affairs, July to August 2025, and a bit about the authors. So Vipin Narang is a Frank Stanton Professor of Nuclear Security and Political Science and Director of the Center of Nuclear Security Policy at MIT. And then from 2022 to 24, he served as U.S. Principal Deputy and then Acting Assistant SecDef for Space Policy, Secretary of Defense for Space Policy. And then Pranay Vaddi is a Senior Nuclear Fellow at the Center of Nuclear Security Policy at MIT. And then from 2022 to 25, he served as Senior Director for Arms Control, Disarmament, and Non-Proliferation at the National Security Council. Again, this episode was basically a summary, just kind of getting out their perspective in a way. It's good to have different points of view and just kind of deepen your own understanding and learn little facts in here, so we all just kind of get general awareness and just deeper understanding on the concepts in general. With that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.